Hi. Okay, we're going to continue on with Judges, and we'll finish it up. Let's go. I'm going to switch you. Okay, let me grab my glasses. We're on 10. Well, first I just want to show you something I meant to show you in Judges 9, because breaking through, remember this book, they put this in context. So the Israelites had many powerful leaders through the years, Abraham, Moses, Joshua, and now Judges, but they never had a king. They wanted to make Gideon a king, but he refused the honor. He feels that the Israelites should only honor God as their king. After a time, the judges, the Israelites, will have their own kings. During this time, you'll see Gideon's opinion about the kings is justified. Many of the kings are not faithful to God and the covenant God made with the Israelites. So they're talking about if we were still doing that, but of course we've moved on. So so that was one, and then this was another one I wanted to show you. Okay, yeah. So prayer of the humble leader. Amalek's father, Gideon, was a humble hero. Amalek was not like his father at all. God chose Gideon. Amalek chose himself. He decided that he wanted to lead, so he killed off all 70 of his brothers except one. The surviving brother curses Abimelech and the people of Shechem who supported him. Even though Abimelech experiences some military successes, he dies without honor. His own people turn on him. And there's a nice prayer. God, make me a humble leader. Help me to lead, not because I want to, but because they call me to lead. Help me to lead, not for my personal glory, but to bring glory to you. Help me not to think of what I want, but to put the needs of others before my own needs. Which is nice, because this is for children, and it helps them to bring it into their life experiences. Okay, and so now the other one is this, because I love reading and writing and all that. So Abimelech's brother Jotham uses a story about trees to describe what Abimelech's leadership will be like and predict Abimelech's doom. In ancient Israel, this kind of story is called a masal. A masal uses a saying or a story to make comparison with a situation the listeners are familiar with. In Jotham's story, he says Abimelech is like the thorn bush that is good only for burning. Remember, he burned the thorn bushes? Sooner or later, those who follow him will be destroyed by him. Think of some situation of wrongdoing or injustice in the world today. What kind of story could you tell to describe to the people what will happen if they don't set things right? Write your own masal. It tells about this problem. Remember, this is for, young, not too young of kids, obviously. And then the other one was this. Sometimes prejudice and jealousy get in the way of someone using his or her gifts. Jephthah was driven from his home by his half-brothers. His mother and father weren't married, and his brothers didn't want to share their inheritance with him. Have you ever been discriminated against because you dress or talk differently? Have you ever kept someone else from being part of a group because they did things differently than you? Fortunately for the Israelites, Jephthah helped them anyway, even though they rejected him. He was a brave soldier and a good leader. God works through all kinds of people. We risk missing out on some of the really great people when we only stick with the ones who are just like us. Branch out and see what God has in store for you. This is why everyone should get this for their kids. And then the last one. Jephthah made a terrible promise, and his daughter is sacrificed. She will die without getting married or having children. Her friends go with her into the mountains to help her mourn. It couldn't have been easy being with her when they knew she was going to be killed. Have you ever known someone who knew when they were dying? A lot of people pull away when someone is dying or even just very sick. They don't want to have to deal with the pain or struggle. God of love, give me friends I can count on when I have something difficult to face or that I just need a shoulder to cry on. Help me, in turn, to be a good friend and offer comfort to the people who count on me. So again, this is good for kids. This is good for adults, so that you can help them understand this. And this will help you understand this. So just saying. Okay, so Judges 10. After a bit much, these judges judged Israel for 23 years, and the other for 22. Jair had 30 children. Let's see. See, I'm brushing over this because it doesn't say a whole lot about them. And Jair had 30 children who had 30 cities, and they called them Javath Jair. For whatever reason, this was in here, so I wanted to touch on it. Oppression by the Philistines and Ammonites. Another repeat, and I think God the teacher wants us to hear this, obviously, or he wouldn't have written it down. The sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Baals and Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of the Philistines and the Ammonites. For 18 years, Israel was sorely distressed. When they finally cried to the Lord, "We have sinned against you, because we have forsaken our God and served Baals." The Lord said, "Didn't I deliver you from this one and that one? And you cried to me, and I delivered you? Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore, I will deliver you no more. Whatever seems good to you," they beg, and the Lord was indignant over the misery of Israel. So the Israelites said, "Who is the man that will begin this fight against the Ammonites?" Oh, there's Jephthah. All right, I was a little ahead with the Jephthah, sorry. So the Lord was indignant over the misery of Israel. So the Israelites said, "Who is the man that will begin the fight against the Ammonite? He will be head over all inhabitants of Gilead." Oh yeah, that should have reminded me. But I did that the day before, so. Okay, so now we're on Judges 11. Jephthah, the one that I just referenced over there in the boxes. Jephthah the Gileadian was a mighty warrior, but he was the son of a harlot. Gilead was the father of Jephthah, and Gilead's wife also bore him sons. When his brothers grew up, they threw Jephthah out. Jephthah fled the worthless fellows collected around him and went raiding with him. He built his skill as a warrior. After a time, the Ammonites made war against Israel. The elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah and asked him to fight for Israel. Jephthah said, "Well, you threw me out of my father's house. Why now come and fight the Ammonites?" They said, "Well, if you come and fight the Ammonites, and we'll let you be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." So he finally agrees. And they say to the Lord to be our witness. So basically that's what all that said. So, and that's, I showed you over here, the unexpected leader. Okay? So he was the rejected brother, and he became the leader. And then, so here's his vow. So there's some back and forth between the Ammonites and Jephthah, and he reminds them of all the events when the Israelites were given the land by the Lord. The Ammonites would not heed his warning. They didn't care. They didn't care what the Gilead said, or even their leader, Jophah, who was their new leader. They didn't care about what he said either. So Jephthah's vow. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he made a vow to the Lord, "If you give me the Ammonites into my hand, then whoever comes forth from the doors to my house to meet me, when I return victorious from the Ammonites, shall be the Lord's, and I will offer him up a burnt offering." So he won the victory, and the Ammonites were subdued before Israel. I don't go into all that because it doesn't really, I think it does go a little bit into it. But I learned from this, Val, that you better be careful what you promise the Lord to give you what you ask him for. If you're asking for something and you say, well, I'll sacrifice this, or you leave it open-ended, whatever, just know that you never know. Jephthah's daughter, she was the only daughter and his only child. When he returned from his victory, she said her virginity would be his offering. Now, this is a little confusing, but that's why I went over here to this. And so he sent her away for 2 months. And at the end of 2 months, she returned. So she mourned, they said. She returns to her father, who did with her according to his vow. Killed her, I guess. She had never known a man, and it has become a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah 4 days every year. So it's like a virgin martyr that makes me want to look a little further into that and see if they still revere her there. Makes me curious. So that's when I came over here to Jephthah made a terrible promise, and his daughter is sacrificed. She will die, that whole bit. So, okay. So now, Judges 12. Intertribal fighting. Jephthah and the men of Kaleed fought with Ephraim about the war. They were mad, and when Jephthah and Kaleed were winning, some tried to come over to the Gilead side, and they would make them pronounce one of the cities. Shibboleth. And when they couldn't pronounce it, they knew they were not real Gilead. So 42,000 in the heights were slaughtered at that day. Jephthah judges Israel for 6 years and then died along with and was buried in the city of Gilead. Okay, so quickly through these three. Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. The next 3 judges judged Israel for 7 years, 10 years, and 8 years, so a total of 25. Then it moves on to the birth of Samson. Here comes another repeat from the Lord, our teacher. Remember, a repeat means the Lord wants us to take this seriously. Israelites did again what was evil in the sight of the Lord, worshiping Baal. So a man named Manoah from the Dan tribe of the original sons of Jacob, and I'm reminding you of the covenant with Abraham, his son Isaac, and then through his son Jacob, and now all those descendants, his 12 sons, have been going through. Well, this group is from the tribe of Dan, from the 12 tribes of Jacob's sons. Yes, that was many generations ago, because Rachel was unable to bear children with Jacob. She gives her maid to Jacob so that she may bear the children through her. She bears Jacob's 5th son, Dan, and Rachel names him Dan because God has judged me and also heard my voice and given me a son. And so therefore Dan means judgment, or he has judged me. And we all know she got jealous of the mother and pushed them out, but she's still one of his sons. So remember, when Jacob blesses his sons upon his deathbed, he says, Dan shall judge people as one of the tribes of Israel. Samson, one of the most famous descendants of the tribe of Dan, is a judge of Israel. So he came from the line of Dan. But Jacob also says Dan will be a serpent by the way, adder in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that the rider will fall backward. And supposedly the tribe of Dan becomes associated with the shrewdness of a serpent and wickedness. And supposedly the tribe of Dan produced Judas Iscariot. That's just a sneak preview. Anyway, okay. I wanted to root you back to our story, just a continuous golden thread, because now with the birth of Samson, we all know the story of Samson and Delilah and sort of separate it from the other stories. So keep in mind, it's a continuous golden thread. Okay, so Manoah and his wife were barren. So an angel of the Lord appeared and said, "Behold, but you are barren, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Drink no wine or strong drink, eat nothing and eat nothing unclean. And you shall conceive and bear a son." No razors and all that bit. Remember all that? So she freaks out and goes and tells her husband, "A man of God came to me and his face was like the angel of God." For some reason, she says very terrible after that. And then she says, "I did not ask him where he was from. He did not tell me his name, but he said to me, 'Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. Drink no wine or strong drink and eat nothing unclean. For the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from birth till the day of his death." So over here, I wanted to show you. This tells you, pay attention when an angel visits. You can usually bet something big is about to happen. A sneak preview way to let you know, the audience, wait a minute, that something important is coming soon. Manoah and his wife each see an angel who promises them they will have a son. They may not have been able to have a child, and this is wonderful news. However, they must raise him as a Nazarite, someone who is especially dedicated to God. Can you think of another childless couple in the Bible who received special visits from angels? One couple in the book of Genesis, and two, the others, the beginning of the Gospel of Luke. So that's what I like about it too. In some places here, it does like that. It pulls them together like Jeff does. Okay, so here it is. The husband Manoah begs the Lord to tell him what they're supposed to do with the son. The angel then appears to the wife again. She runs and gets the husband. He comes and says, "Are you the one who spoke with my wife? And should we do what would she would do?" And he says, "Well, she can't eat or drink anything from the vine, strong or unclean, and that she was commanded to observe." So Manoah is like, "Okay, well, let us make you this meal." And the angel says, "Well, no, I can't have that meal, but you can offer a burnt offering." Of course, Manoah didn't know he was an angel, and that is until he did the burnt offering, and the angel went up. I hope you can see that. So the angel went up and fell on their faces. Yes, it says right here, they fell on their faces to the ground. So they were told to name him Samson. So, 14. Samson's grown up now and getting married. So Samson meets a daughter of the Philistine who is not of his kinsmen, so not in the 12 tribes of Jacob. So it's not acceptable for the Israelites to marry. And generally, they're still that way today. I know because I married an Ashkenazi Jew, and he told me prior, which is why my daughter has a half of, quote, pure half Ashkenazi. Apparently, he was 100%. So, back to Samson. His parents are less than pleased. They don't know this they don't know that this came from the Lord. So, they don't know this came from the Lord, as the Lord was looking for a chance to fight the Philistines. And since they were ruling Israel at the time, they had domination over them. Now, keep in mind, it was when the Lord said to them, "If you don't drive out everyone out of the land of Israel, they will be a thorn in your side." Just keep that in mind. So we know the story that he sets out to go. We know the story of Samson, but he sets out to go and ask the girl if she'll marry him. And now the Lord made Samson very strong, and suddenly they were going through vineyards as he was going to ask her. And a lion roared, and Samson was able to tear the lion apart with his bare hands, which he did not tell his parents. So I guess he gets to the girl and she agrees to marry him. So on his way back, he stops to see where he killed the lion and finds inside the body of the lion a swarm of bees and some honey. He scraped it out and ate it as he walked along and brought some home to his family, to his parents, but not telling them about the lion. So basically this implies he's a wild man that ate honey. Remember, there's another wild man that ate honey, John the Baptist, which they talk about in here. So Samson in trouble. Samson, for all his feat strength, seems to keep getting himself in trouble. Don't forget, he's from the Danites. If he would only think first, he might not get into trouble so much. His anger also gets him into trouble. First, he told the riddle. Yeah, he tells a riddle at his wedding feast and thought no one would guess. But the guests found out the answer from his new wife, which made Samson furious. Besides killing 30 Philistine men, he stormed away from his new wife when her father then married her off to his best man. Samson was even more furious. He burned down the Philistine crops in the orchards and revenge. The Philistines killed his wife and her family for revenge. It just kept getting worse and worse. When you get upset, do you stop and think, or do you just react? And the end, Samson forgets that God is where his real strength comes from. Can you remember and keep things cool when things around you heat up? Try remembering that God is your strength next time you get angry or upset. Again, this is good for children. Okay, so they kind of told what happened there. So it's an interesting story about the riddle. I don't have time to get into it, but there's a whole song if you want to look at it. And Breaking Through has that box that summarized it. That's what I like best about Breaking Through for kids. It'll help them think a little bit. Okay. Anyway, so we all know Samson was a hothead, and because of that riddle, he goes and kills the 30 men and the parents of the Philistine woman he wanted to marry, and then he killed the 30 men, and the parents of the Philistine woman he wanted to marry gave her to his best man at the wedding to marry. So, when he finds that out, he goes and burns down the Philistines' fields. When they find out it was him, they're furious, and they find out he did it because the girl's father gave her to another man. So they go and kill the Philistine woman that Samson loved and her father and burn down their house. So now Samson is really furious. So because they killed the woman he loved, and he goes and kills many Philistines and vows he won't stop until he pays them back. So they try to kill him, but he's strong and he outsmarts them over and over. And Breaking Bread gets a little bit more into it, so it helps you understand it if you have a hard time understanding this. So they try to kill him, but he's strong and he outsmarts them over and over again. So he was thirsty at the end after he gets away, and he splits a cavity and water comes out, and he drinks from it until his spirit returned and revived. Therefore, it's called En-Hakkore in Levi to this day. Again, this was an old thing, so I don't know if it still remains. So, Samson judged Israel for 20 years in the day of the Philistines. Okay, so now we're into Samson and Delilah. We all know the story of Samson and Delilah. Such an interesting story. If you don't know, you got to go and read it in detail. But we're going to go over it some. But basically, it's a harlot, Delilah, got him to reveal that his strength was in his long hair. So his hair gets cut, and the Philistines come and get him and pay the harlot for him. This is after him going, and she kept trying to get it out of him, and he kept not telling her the truth, and she kept saying, well, you're just mocking me, and over again, until finally she gets him to tell her it was to cut the hair. So they come and they get him, they pay her the 30 pieces of silver, and then after she cut his hair, obviously, they pay the harlot for him, and they put him in prison and gouge out his eyes. But soon thereafter, his hair begins to grow again. So he's in prison. with his head shaved, but his hair begins to grow again. So they take Samson out of prison to make a sport of him, I guess, mock him and tease him for fun. And he says, let me lean against the pillar, because he's blind now. So they put him next to the pillar and he holds on to it. And he calls on the Lord, begging him to strengthen him. And he says, I will die with the Philistines, just strengthen me. So he has his hands between the pillars and he pushes on both of them. He becomes strong again. He gets his strength back. And the whole thing crashes down and they all die, including him. And he had judged Israel for 20 years total before he went to prison. So we're going to jump over here to this 17 and 18 because, well, I'll just go into, let's see, 17 and 18. Let me see. Okay. So I did want to say this. Be careful who you trust. And it's basically talking about how Samson, like Lisa, they give an example here, shared his secret with someone who wasn't trustworthy. What's wrong with Samson? Why couldn't he see Delilah was trying to trick him? Why did he trust her with his most important secret? What about Lisa? Why did she tell someone she hardly knew her biggest secret? Read Sirach, and it tells you, and write down your own advice about being taken advantage of. Okay, and they also have some good stuff here. Samson gave in to Delilah because she was bothering him. What should he have done instead? So see, it teaches them. Okay, so 17, I got mostly from over here, but we'll stick over here since this is where we are. Micah and the Levite, there's a man named Micah who steals silver from his mother. To make an idol. He made his own church, and then he gets a man who says he's a Levite to be his priest because he would pay him 10 pieces of silver per year. So at the house of Micah, he says, now I know the Lord will prosper because I have a Levite as a priest. So is it here? Okay, yeah, and it says, what's wrong with this picture? And it just goes through that. Micah stolen from his mother, stole silver from made silver from an idol. Spies steal from Micah. We're going to get into that. And when Micah and his neighbors try to stop the Danite army, they act like nothing is wrong. The Danites kill the whole town of peaceful people and burn it to the ground. These actions are generally several of the 10 go against the 10 commandments. Twice the author mentions there was no king in Israel at the time. Book of Judges was written later at a time when there was a king. It seems like the author may be suggesting things are better with kings. I don't know about that, but that's what they say. So of course, in these days, there was no king, and the tribe of the Danites wanted a place to dwell. So they sent someone to spy the land. And they went to the house of Micah. They recognized the young Levite, and they asked him if God's journey that they're on will succeed. The Levite says, go in peace. The journey on which you go under is the eye of the Lord. Well, of course, we know there he's to the to what Micah made. So the idol. So the Danites come back and take Levi the priest by luring him, and they steal him and the idol. But the priest doesn't stop them, the Levite, from stealing. When Micah tries to stop them, the priest doesn't help. The Danites kill the whole town of peaceful people, burn it to the ground. Obviously, these actions are against the 10 commandments, and there's no king. Remember what it just said. So Danites settle in Laish. After stealing Micah, the priest, they go out to Laish and burn it up and settle there, and name the city Dan after the Danites. So now we're on to 19. The Levite's concubine, this is the worst, this is the most violent part. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and the Levite decides to take a concubine. Then one day his concubine becomes angry with him, so she goes off to her father's house. 4 months later, he goes after her at her father's house and says he will speak kindly to her. I guess he was being abusive, and that's why she left. The father invites him in, welcomes him, and says, stay here for so many days. And each day he wants to leave. He said, no, do this or that, stay. Well, and so finally he says, no, they need to go. And by then, they're traveling for some time, and they meet an old man who says, oh, you can stay at my house. And he feeds them and washes their feet, and they washed their feet, ate and drank. And here it is, the crime of the Benjamites. They were enjoying an evening with the old man, and some men surround the house and say, let me in, so that we may know him. That means they want to have sex and rape him. Well, the old man says, here, you can take my virgin daughter and the concubine and ravish them, and do with them what seems good. But don't do such a vile thing to my guest. Again, this is one of those weird stories where they offer their virgin daughters to save a man. Certainly not a Me Too movement back then, was there, Rick? But the men wouldn't listen. They took the concubine, they had sex with her, and they abused her all night until morning, and then they let her go. She laid on the doorstep of the old man the whole night until the master arose in the morning. He said, get up, let's go. She did not answer. Apparently she was dead, so he put her up on the donkey. And when he got home, he got a knife and took hold of the concubine and divided her limb by limb, and delivered 12 pieces, sent it through the entire territory of Israel. And obviously everyone's very upset by it and said something like, this has never happened, and they want to consider it in council. So we get to 20. The tribes of Israel attacked the Benjaminites, so all the sons of Israel and all the chiefs of the people, the tribes of Israel, came out, and the tribe presented themselves as an assembly of God of 400,000 men on foot, and that drew swords. They said, tell us how this wickedness was brought to pass. And so the Levite of the woman who was murdered answered and told them it's a repeat of all that happens. He says, okay, let's go. They all say, okay, let's go and decide what should happen. So they decide to go and get the men that did this and murdered her. And they said, hand over the man, we will put him to death and put away the evil from Israel. But the Benjaminites refuse. So they go to war with the sons of Israel. So the Israelites consult with Pinehas. Remember, Pinehas was the son of Eleazar, who was the son of Aaron, who was the high priest. Remember, he went with Moses to lead the people out of Egypt. Well, Pinehas was his grandson. So Pinehas consults with the Lord, and the Lord says, go up tomorrow. I will give them to your hand. So the next day, they killed 25,100 men, and the Benjaminites saw that they were defeated. So they do something, and they ambush and, some get away. That was a little confusing, and the other one didn't really clear it up much, but they did say, they cleared it up enough to the degree where we can, that it can be explained. So, So they were defeated, 21. We're at 21 now. So now the men of Israel had sworn at Mitzvah, a city near Jerusalem, no one shall give his daughter to a Benjamin. And they feel sorry, but then they feel sorry for the Benjamites. But they made that curse through with the Lord, so they couldn't break it. So they decided to go get a group that was outside of their tribes in the city of Jabesh, and they kill all the women and the children and the men, except for the young virgins. There were only 400 of virgins. So they went, so they took the 400 virgins, but it wasn't enough. So they had to go to a yearly festival in Shiloh where other people were outside of their 12 tribes. And they took all the dancing girls for the remainder of the Benjaminites. So that way it was not breaking the curse that they had put upon the Benjaminites with the Lord, and not to give any of their daughters. So it starts again, repeated. So basically that's all that says. And then it ends on, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what he thought was right in his own eyes. So That was a very wow ending. Now tomorrow there's only a few pages in Samuel 1 through 8. 1 through 8. So that won't take as long. But there's something else I want to share with how to memorize the Jeff Cavins program after we finish those 3 pages. And before we start, the 6th biblical period, and you guessed it, that is the royal kingdom. And let me just show you, where is the royal kingdom? It's really, well, you will see it when we start. Yeah, this is king. Yeah, it's right before this. Okay. So yeah, that's our 6th period. We'll start that after we do Samuel and after we make something special. You're gonna like it. Okay.